So, warning, this video is going to discuss things like mental health issues, suicide, self-harm, and it's going to very much spoil the endings of Smile, Lights Out, and The Babadook. Watch at your own discretion, please. This is my randomology, and today we have to talk about Smile. I just reacted to Smile a couple days ago. That video should be up by the time you're seeing this. And I have some issues with this movie, and it's something that I think horror in general needs to really get a grip on. Using mental health and trauma as a metaphor. Now, let's be honest with ourselves. Mental illness, trauma, depression, all these things, they've been with horror since the very beginning. Gothic literature is pretty much just based on depression and melancholia and all these different things. How many horror movies are just kind of based on somebody being crazy, insane, hallucinating, all these different fun things? Heck, in horror RPGs, you can even have insanities as traits. But the thing that several movies have been trying to do the last couple of years, which I think is relatively new, is not so much use mental health and insanity and all these different things as just kind of things to move the plot along, but as something to explore. Like, let's be honest, nobody sees Silence of the Lambs and wonders, gee, I wonder how Buffalo Bill is gonna get through this period of dysmorphia. Nobody's wondering if Freddy Krueger is ever really gonna, get in touch with his inner child and really work through some issues.
Yeah, but I think I could change him.
There have been several works now that are looking at mental illness and using it in their stories and using the horror as a metaphor for various illnesses, trauma, depression, all these different things. And it's been kind of hit and miss. And after I finished watching Smile, I unfortunately had to put Smile on the pile of really screwed the pooch. I mean, don't get me wrong, I really liked Smile up until the last 15 minutes. I thought I was having a great time. Fun little jump scares. Actually, the biggest jump scare that I think I've had on this channel was from this movie. Oh, what? Now it's not there? Oh, Jesus!
What? Get the Escalade. We're out of here.
Now, the whole point in Smile is that Rose is being now haunted by this thing that has latched onto her after one of her patients kills herself in front of Rose. This thing now starts messing with her. It's going to make her hallucinate. It starts just ruining her life so that she is on edge. She has to confront things about her own past. The beginning of the movie is her as a child walking in on her mother who has OD'd. The way the curse works is that one person catches it, and then when they apparently seemingly lose all hope, they end up killing themselves as the creature fully possesses them, and whoever witnesses this now becomes the next target. They now carry the thing, and a few days later, the cycle repeats all over again. They kill themselves, somebody witnesses it, and so on and so forth. And the movie is not subtle about this being about trauma. One character even specifically states that this thing, this entity, whatever it is, feeds on trauma. It needs it.
She has to make sure there's a witness for it to pass too, because this thing needs trauma to spread.
Kind of like how real trauma spreads. If it affects one person, it affects their whole lives. They can pass it on, they can lash out, they can do all these different things. The way that one of the survivors actually managed to live through the curse is by murdering somebody else, having somebody witness that, and the creature latched onto the other person. Kind of like how real victims of trauma can often lash out and continue a cycle going. Think, for example, things like child abuse. So the movie is not subtle in the least that this is about mental illness and trauma and depression and having to deal with these things. The entity is very much a metaphor for trauma and mental health issues.
Metaphors? I hate metaphors. That's why my favorite book is Moby Dick. No frou-frou symbolism, just a good simple tale about a man who hates an animal.
And this is where we really start to lose the plot, because the way the rules work, it seems like the most logical thing if you don't want this to pass on to somebody else is to lash out so that it no longer affects you, like, abuse, or kill yourself far away from everybody so that there are no witnesses and the curse stops. And that seems to be what Rose is thinking at the very end when she goes back to her childhood home, which has been abandoned for a long time, and she is just gonna let it take over her. So Rose has this big conversation with her mother / the entity where she basically admits, yes, this is something that has eaten away at my life. It has dominated everything about me. And so the entity's not happy about this, starts attacking her, and Rose basically has the big epiphany. This is in my mind. Doesn't make it any less real, but if it's in my mind, I have control of my mind. And so she sets the entity on fire. Rose walks out of the house as it's on fire and starts collapsing around her. And if the movie had ended there, it would have been okay. I mean, the final confrontation still feels a little rushed, a little weak, but it would have kind of sent the message that trauma is not a thing that you can defeat easily. It's a thing that you have to actually confront. It's a thing that you have to be honest with yourself about. They might have, Instead, we get this. The entity's still alive, Rose is still hallucinating, her old boyfriend sees this, she realizes that she's never going to get rid of this thing, the entity takes her over, Rose lights herself on fire, and the cycle's going to continue all over again. You can't get rid of it, you have to live with it until it kills you. That's the message of Smile. Trauma will eventually just kill you when you kill yourself. And this is deeply, deeply problematic. Because like I said, a lot of older horror movies, and when I say older, I mean even like as early as 10 years ago, they were never really about dealing with mental health issues. They were really just there in order to move the plot along, to give characterization. It wasn't about confronting them. It was about what they did to everybody else and how they affected the plot. Smile, however, is very much about mental health and how you should deal with it. And the central message seems to be, well, you're gonna die. Which reminds me a lot of another movie that I absolutely loved to bits when I saw it several years ago, Lights Out, which has a similar premise. In that one, there's a ghost that latched onto a mother and haunted her for years, and her children now have to deal with the consequences of that ghost haunting her and recently killing her husband. And just like Smile, that movie is also not subtle at all that this is about depression and mental illness. The ghost is very much a metaphor for the trauma that her mother has carried for all this time and is now affecting her family. And of course, what's the solution to all this? How do we get rid of the ghost? Well, obviously, mom has to put a gun to her head and pull the trigger. Yeah, no, that's the climax of the movie. The ghost is about to win, mom comes out with a gun and shoots herself in the head. So that movie also really dropped the ball in the last couple of minutes, just like Smile did. But again, I mean, horror rarely has a happy ending, so I'm sure a couple of you are probably thinking, well, how would you end it? What's a good way of dealing with this thing? May I point you to another film from several years before that, The Babadook. Now, that movie is also about mental health. It's also about motherhood and trauma and depression and just having to live with all these things. And at the end of it, the Babadook, which is very much a metaphor for the trauma that our main character has gone through for years since her husband died and her child was born, she finally confronts it. But she doesn't defeat it. Not entirely. The movie basically ends with her having contained the Babadook in her basement. She still has to deal with this thing. She still has to essentially feed it. There are days when it will lash out at her, but she has to confront it and get through the day and then do it all over again. Just like real mental health issues. You don't get rid of them for the most part. You have to learn to cope, how to self-heal, how to self-treat, how to get through the day and then make it through the next day and then make it through the next day. It's as happy an ending as I think you could have gone for that movie. She ends up bonding with her son. She ends up admitting a lot of truths to herself. The Babadook is still there. It's literally in her basement in a severely weakened state because it can no longer feed on her fear and insecurities because she's now actively addressing them. The Babadook, while a lot of people don't like it, a lot of people hate that kid, by the way, I think is probably one of the best examples of a movie that treated this particular theme, mental health, used it to tell a story, and the story itself actually developed in a way that is, I guess, encouraging for people who have these issues. You can't kill them, you can't snap your fingers and make them go away, but you can definitely deal with them. You can definitely have something which resembles a normal life. Smile, Lights Out, and a lot of other movies really don't seem to understand that. They just use their monsters as these stand-ins for trauma and depression, and they don't know what to do with them. Smile, I had so much fun with this movie up until the very end. Like I said, if they had stopped the movie when Rose is walking out of the house as it's burning, it would have been a weak ending, but it would have worked. So to anybody who wants to use these things, mental health, in their stories and wants to do metaphors and allegories of going through these things, please keep in mind how these things are actually handled in the real world. They're not just these things that are attacking you that you can just fight back against and kill them. It's a very complex, very sensitive issue. I'm not saying somebody's going to see Smile and end up doing something drastic and irreversible, but what I am saying is this movie is very much sending the wrong message, and it is something that in certain individuals could fester and lead to other thoughts. So I want to actually amend my review of Smile at the end of the last video. I'm going to say that I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 stars up until the last 15 minutes. If you include those last 15 minutes, this movie definitely tanks its rating. It is there are movies I've seen, horror movies I've seen, that definitely leave you feeling a little ill, definitely feeling like you've seen something that's going to haunt you for the rest of your life. And that's, I mean, it's horror, you kind of expect that, but this one leaves you feeling that, not so much for what you saw, but looking around, like it's not a good feeling. It's not a good sensation. So if you haven't seen this movie and you are dealing with your own issues, I very much will warn you to please keep all these things in mind. I really wanted to like this movie, but hey, if you like what you're watching, you like the commentary here, go ahead and subscribe, go over to Patreon, subscribe there. That's actually the best way to support the channel. There's a lot more stuff going on Patreon than there is here or on Facebook, which you can find in the description below. Otherwise, I will see you next time.